You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
This episode is brought to you by Sapelo Insurance. Sapelo is Georgia's premier film insurance agency. With over 10 years of experience in commercial lines and with film industry professionals on staff, Sapelo offers you the insurance you need for your next project, including equipment, general liability, auto liability, workers' comp, guild travel, and more. Contact Sapelo when you are starting your next production. For more information, check out their website at sapeloins.com.
Hey, and welcome to episode 351 of the AFC Indie Filmmaking Podcast. Since it's spooky movie season, you're probably looking around streaming networks looking for a scary movie, and you may have stumbled across Netflix's No One Gets Out Alive. And if you haven't yet, you should. Director Santiago Mangini came on the show to talk about making the film, how he got attached to the project, his approach, considering it's an adaptation of a book, and much more. Make sure to head over to patreon.com/AFCIndieFilm, where he also gives advice to newbie directors how to cultivate a body of work to get hired onto projects like this. Very helpful, and you don't want to miss it. You can get it for as low as $1 a month, again, over at patreon.com/AFCIndieFilm. There's literally hours of content over there you're missing if you're not subscribed over at Patreon. Speaking of Patreon, thanks to Ken Merritt for getting the shout-out option. Really appreciate you and all our Patreons for supporting the show. Also want to give a quick shout-out to Chelsea over at Netflix PR for helping arrange this interview. Real quick before we get started, I need to tell you about our sponsors, Element Certified Public Accountants and Consultants. In the past, you may have gone to accounting firms seeking money help, but they didn't quite understand the film industry. You feel like they don't quite get what you do, your very specific money issues working in this industry. For example, you could own a production company, you could work on set, you could do a little bit of both. Those three paths are very different and provide unique challenges. Wouldn't it be nice if someone was, let's say, fluent in your language? Well, hey, that's Element Certified Public Accountants and Consultants. They're a film, television, entertainment-focused accounting firm. They provide tax credit audits, individual and corporate tax return preparation, loan-out company creation, and production accounting. So whatever your unique situation is, they've got you covered. Save the drama for the set and let Element take the burden of tax and accounting off your back. Visit them over at elementcpas.com. That is elementcpas.com. They are fluent in your language. All right, on to the show. Enjoy the interview with Santiago, and I'll see you in the intermission. All right, Santiago, I really appreciate you coming on. And first of all, congrats on, completing a film, which, as you know, is borderline impossible. And people still managed to do it, and you made a great one. And then you got on kind of the white whale of filmmakers, I guess, is getting on Netflix. So there's obviously a lot to talk about. But yeah. First of all, just how are you doing? It's been a crazy couple years. Like, catch us up on Santiago. How are you doing?
Wow. Well, thank you for asking me how I'm doing. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I mean, it's quite an exciting time. I mean, you kind of work so long on like building a career, and you sort of take all these sort of small steps to get you a little closer to where you want to be. And this is a big step for me, making my first feature film. So that felt like a big sort of adventure on its own, and just going through that and surviving that whole experience is amazing. So I feel very proud to be able to go through all that. And at the same time, it's also sort of like, it's such a daunting task that you go through a wave of emotions as you go through it. But now I feel pretty good. It's done. It's gone out there. There's been a really nice reception for it. People have been giving me really beautiful feedback, and it's been very rewarding. So now it's sort of like full steam ahead for the future. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and it definitely launched at the right time. I mean, it's spooky season. It's a great spooky movie. Super atmospheric. which is I love, just really getting pulled into it. You know what I mean? So break it down real quick. Tell us about the film and give us a brief synopsis.
I'll do my best with that. Well, basically, the film takes place in Cleveland. It's a story of a undocumented migrant coming from Mexico into the United States and trying to make it in America. And she has all these hopes and ambitions to start a new life, but slowly she realizes that the place she's boarding up and staying at has other plans for her. So it becomes sort of a haunted house film that turns into something quite sinister and surreal by the end of it.
Yeah, and speaking of turns into, I don't want to spoil too much. I'm trying to think of what questions I can ask that don't involve some, because I feel like there's some reveals that people should just see.
Yeah, fair enough.
But man, well, okay, let's back up a little bit. So before you ever got started on the thing, just like right before, maybe even just right before production, I'm curious, like what future did you see for the film? You know, we all have high aspirations for everything we make, but you're signing on to the project. You think it's super cool, and do you think just like, I want to make the best thing possible, or do you have a vision of like, I want it to go here, I want it to be seen by, you know, this demographic, that kind of thing? Yeah,
no,
like the big vision.
Yeah, the latter, I'd say no to the latter. I just, I was really focused on making it, well, personally, I'd really to, a film that I really would want to see. That's sort of like always sort of the main, barometer for me. So like I always base it on, the things that I love and the things that I get excited about and the films that I really sort of enjoy going back to. So I'd say when I got the hold of the script and saw the potential of it, I started thinking like, this is what I would love to do with it. And the production went with it, and they went with me basically on that sort of take on that I presented. So as I dug into the film, I just kept thinking of like, how can I make it more exciting or more interesting given all the parameters of the book or the script and so forth. And so for me, it was very much sort of honing in on making a fun and engaging story and not focusing on like the demographic. I think that's dangerous, it's slippery path to go into, because as soon as you kind of go in there, you can doubt every decision you make based on assumptions that you really have no right in making. So for me, I just sort of focused on like, what do I really like, and what does it work? What works for me, and that kind of thing. So that's where I come from, at least.
Yeah, that makes sense too. Just it's more of the producer's job is to worry about that kind of stuff, and just like, well,
yeah,
we wouldn't have picked this project in the first place if we didn't think it would sell well between ages 18 to 30, whatever. That's a
good point. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, they did approach me with the script, so in that case, they had already, I'm assuming, gone through all that exercise. And once I came on board, it was really like execution and vision. So yeah.
What was it about the script that attracted you?
Well, it's one of the elements that really got me excited for the script. Was there's a big component of like just the arc of the story, which is really fun. Which is sort of like, as I kind of touched upon briefly, this sort of idea that you start as one thing and then you turn into something else by the end. So that was one element that I really loved. And the other is the fact that the story, it brought in this like angle of this undocumented migrant kind of getting into a situation where like an immigrant trying to assimilate to a place. And I really connected with that idea because I myself am an immigrant. I live in Canada, but I'm originally from Brazil. My parents are Argentinian. So like, I've always been surrounded with the idea of sort of the process of assimilating to a different country. It's always sort of a thing that's always sort of been present in my life. And then seeing a script that just kind of touched on those feelings in kind of an interesting way, I really enjoyed. And I later found out it was actually one of the things that was changed from the novel, which I thought was quite interesting once I'd read the novel. I was like, oh man, like that's a pretty dramatic change. But once I saw that the story structure and the core ideas remained the same, I immediately got very excited because it was yet faithful to the book at the same time as a new angle, a new take to it that I really kind of personally connected with. So I got excited for those reasons.
I'm glad you brought that up. I was going to ask if you even read the novel or if you thought maybe, oh, that's too much. Like I want to just focus on the script, but you did read the novel and okay.
I did. I made sure to go back to the source material just to be sure like what was changed. And I also wanted to see like where the screenwriters were coming from. on why the changes were made. So it also helps sort of see, sometimes like you read a script and it's sometimes very simple writing, right? So you have very basic action and reactions happening in the script. The action lines are quite simple in terms of like what's on the page. And in a novel, you can get a lot more detail in terms of atmosphere, in terms of setting, in terms of all these other elements that sort of feed into some of the tone and atmosphere of the film. So that's why it was really useful to me to go back to that book and sort of dig into what Adam Neville, the writer, wrote and sort of see where he was coming from in terms of those ideas.
That's smart. And you always hear about adaptations just kind of from the writing perspective, but don't get too much from the directing perspective about that kind of thing. Like, I mean, I've adapted a book before. The film didn't get made, unfortunately, but I remember reading. God, I'm blanking now. Maybe it was Cold Mountain. The writer of the film said he read the book twice. He read it once just to get the gist of the story, just to read it. The second time was to remember key details, and then he literally never touched it again. He said the stuff that I remember is the good stuff, and that's the stuff that should go in the movie.
That's a good way of looking at it. It's interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was really smart. So I did the same thing when I adapted this novel into script. I read it once, and then the stuff that you remember. And I know people get upset. I'm sure fans of the novel got upset at your film. You're just like, hey, you forgot X, Y, Z, but it's a movie. It's a different thing, and people just don't quite grasp that you got to pick and choose. Again, the stuff you remember is the good stuff, and you got to pick the good stuff, and there's only so much you can fit in.
Yeah, I mean, the book is like 600 pages, and our film is about 80 minutes long. So at some point, it was going to get cut down. Yeah, but I think what's been really cool was, like, I think the book has a very unique style in terms of how it draws out the tension and dread overall, like over the entirety of the book. And also, there's like two distinctive halves in the book that are quite different. Like the first half is really where our film takes place.
Oh, okay.
But at the same time, there is an element that, I mean, what I thought was very clever about the writing of the script was that it touched on the core idea over the entire book. So you still had a conclusion that felt appropriate to the book, even though we were kind of reducing it down to its essentials. So that was something that was quite cool, just to see the take that the script writers went through with. So that for me was quite fun.
Yeah.
And then obviously, I got the chance to talk with Adam as well and sort of pick his brains about that experience. And he was all for it. So that was also very encouraging when you have the author being like, no problem, go for it. I was like, okay, go. We're good then. That was a big thing for me too.
I wonder if it helped that the ritual turned out so great that he was like, I trust people. I imagine if the first film, like it was adapted, like he was like terrible. It was like, well, I don't know.
That's always a scary thing when you give something that you worked on for so long to anybody to take and make different. But I think as soon as you accept that, you have to accept that changes will be made. And no matter what, as soon as someone else interprets it, it's going to be different. Like, it already becomes different from screenwriter to director. Like that, even that step is an intentional one, but it changes. Even that one that is supposed to be as faithful to the script, it always changes because the casting changed, the location changed, the weather is different than what's written. Like all these things come into a factor that end up changing the original intention. But hopefully you are, able to stay faithful to the story and to the characters and carry the story along through those ideas and those other elements. Sometimes they might not come through, but they're still important. Just that you're able to tell a good story without necessarily always having to feel stuck, thinking that you're not doing it exactly as intended. That's always a tricky balance, but I think it's important to recognize it and do your homework, which is hopefully what we did in our film.
Yeah, and also you mentioned the runtime, and I was interested in that. I mean, wasn't even a tight, like full 90. Like you felt like you didn't. And I really like that, actually. I like movies that, maybe you could pad that extra 10 minutes or whatever, but who needs it? Like you just went in and said, like, we've got an 80-minute movie and this is what it is. I love that. Was there any pushback about that? Like, oh, why don't we add a few scenes or whatever?
Well, when you first there's when you first get a script, you get like a number of pages and you sort of have a rough estimate of how long a film is. So, 100-page script or 90-page script, you sort of have an idea of how it is.
Yeah.
And there's an expectation sort of like unspoken of like, that's what the film is supposed to be theoretically, which is a good rule of thumb, but no one really was saying, oh, it needs to be that case. And we didn't have any pushback. As soon as people saw that the film was working at the length that it was, there was never an issue. I don't think there was a single instance where we kind of, in the back, the editor and I, Mark Towns, where we discussed, that as sort of as a joke, being like, do we care? Do we worry? It's like, no, just keep going. Just focus on the story. And nice. I think that's important. And it helped. I mean, what's funny is actually, I think, if I could have another go at it, I might even cut more, like I could.
Oh, really? Wow.
I could always, I mean, the thing is, like, I like to approach my edit as kind of like a very severe kind of, just be a little bit brutal with it. Like I take my time away from the material as best I can. So I walk away after a shoot and sort of like, take time off, forget whatever you try as best to forget what you did.
Yeah.
And then you go back into it with the idea of like, okay, what is working and what isn't, just for the sake of it, just like remove it. Like, what would happen? Like, does it break it completely? Is it essential? Why is it there? You sort of re-question everything as from like a story and an editorial point of view, literally from a story editorial point of view. And I find it a really good exercise. In the end, it ends up all coming back, but it's still a good process, at least for myself, to kind of be a bit aggressive with the material and not precious when it comes to something. Because you could be, this wonderful, super wide, beautiful shot of this landscape that you just think is perfect for atmosphere and tone. And then in reality, it's killing your pace. Like there's all these little things that could add up.
Film Impact Georgia is a nonprofit organization dedicated to providing a voice to independent film production in the Peach State. Their focus includes short film grants, development labs, community boosting events, and support services from vendors and mentors. Georgia has diverse and engaging storytellers, and FIG is determined to help break down the barriers to creation in our state. Find more information about the organization and how to get involved at filmimpactgeorgia.org.
Hey, and welcome to the intermission. This is Chuck, just breaking in real quick. Trying to make my voice all velvety and smooth because Santiago actually told me before we recorded that he really liked my voice. And I've gotten that compliment a few times, and I told him the story how I'm pretty sure I've told it on the show before. We had a guy who was trying to make another show kind of similar to this. He wanted me to host. We did actually a few episodes, and he said, "You got that velvety voice." And of course, I told my wife about that, and so she still makes fun of me for it. She's like, "Oh, you and your velvety voice." But I appreciated that, and also I appreciated the fact that he told me that he was listening to the show, and he said, "You just make it so like easy listening and fun, and just kind of like a chill hangout." And I always like getting that compliment because that's quite literally my vision for the podcast when we started 7.5 years ago. So good that I haven't lost that, So real quick, some announcements. This upcoming Monday, October 18th, head to Film Bar Monday at Midway Pub. And again, just head there so you can hang out, meet some new people, eat, drink, and be merry. It's not really a networking thing. It's just like a friend-making thing. Maybe you work together, maybe you don't, but go there for drinks and laughs, and that's it. And then maybe later you connect and make something. Also coming up this month, October 23rd, it's a Saturday, Film Impact Georgia is having their Spooktacular fundraiser. Come dressed in your best Halloween costume for a night of community, music, food, and drink. There's going to be games, all sorts of stuff. And, best of all, every dollar raised goes to support Georgia creators. So if you're looking for something fun and spooky, and also you want to feel good about yourself, head to Film Impact Georgia's Spooktacular fundraiser. And you can find more information about that at filmimpactgeorgia.org or over at the Facebook page. So it was great talking to Santiago. Cool guy with a great story about he just made a bunch of great films that he wanted to make, let himself be very creative, and now he has a movie on Netflix. Got hired to make a movie for Netflix. And that's just what I say every week. You just got to keep doing the work. I know it's tough right now. It's hard to even probably think about doing any stuff creative. Dealing with the pandemic, maybe you're trying to get back into a job or something, work, whatever, like you're going to the office for the first time and they're like, "Oh, COVID's over." Like, no, it's not. And you're having to deal with all that kind of stuff. It's hard to think about being creative. But literally the only thing you can do is just keep moving forward, and it's a testament to that. And I highly recommend, for real, the Patreon. I'm not just saying that. I mean, it's $1. Go check that out if you're curious how he cultivated this body of work over at Patreon. He talks about it. Even if you just sign up for that and just immediately cancel, whatever. It's a great piece of advice. And of course, make sure to watch the movie. Similar to The Ritual, if you saw that. Of course, it's by the same author, the guy that wrote the book. But I guess structurally, I would say it's kind of similar in certain ways. I don't want to give spoilers or whatever, but if you like The Ritual, you'll most likely like No One Gets Out Alive. So go check that out. Plus, I saw Netflix is like recommending it. So I mean, like it's out there. This is perfect time for it to come out. So go check it out. So I'm gonna get you back to it. Hope you're enjoying the interview. Keep writing, directing, producing, acting, whatever you're trying to do. Just keep pushing forward. All right, back to the show. Yeah. I remember when my co-producer of my production company, Dustin, he was at USC and he was directing his thesis film, and I had this feature length film called Consumed, and he said, I want to do it as a short film, and it has to be this, it was like 16 pages or something. I was like, it's impossible. And it really wasn't impossible. I mean, we squeezed until all the blood came out, and we could have cut more. And then I think that was a huge lesson to me, just realizing how you can always cut, like you said. There's always, you can always trim, you can always cut and make more succinct or whatever. And then we did it. It was crazy. And it might be a good exercise for a lot of people, just to, if they got this, I've got this grandiose film and it's got to be 200 pages or whatever. Like maybe try and get the essence of it into a short film and realize how much you don't actually need in there.
I have a story about that idea, because I made an animated, like, experimental documentary, if I guess I could name it that way, about the Voyager spacecrafts. This is like the satellites that we launched into space to take images and of the different exterior planets of our solar system.
Yeah.
And it's this beautiful journey. I just wanted to kind of portray this like little short film about this. And I have a visual effects background, so I animated most of the film myself. I used some archival footage and so forth. And then I ended up taking about a year working on this thing, just on my free time. I had no grants, no money, nor nothing. Just my own time was dedicated to it, just a kind of spare in the moment kind of thing. And I spent a lot of time designing and building all these different assets and things, and really being very kind of studious of the material and taking time to do like research on like what the actual like design blueprints were and all that stuff. So I got to a point where I had my film was about 20 minutes long, short film, and it's an experimental short film with not a lot of, there's no dialogue. So
right, okay.
It's demanding a lot, but it's supposed to be about the journey of this vessel through the vacuum of space. And at one point I remember looking at it and I was like, I think I need to just like go down to 15. And the reason I say that was I have many filmmaker friends of mine who've done the festival runs and so forth, and they're sort of like this unspoken rule for to get into a festival, you want to get like sub 15 minutes. And the idea is that it's easier for programmers to program your short the shorter it is. So they have a several hour slot. They have like an hour and a half slot for short films. They don't want to put a 30-minute film because that could be 3 short 10-minute films that are excellent. And they would, those are 3 filmmakers that have an opportunity to go to the festival as opposed to 1. So the theory is like, you have to be 3 times as good if you're going to make a 30-minute film. And the usual kind of rough rule of thumb is 15 minutes. So I was like, all right, you know what? I'm going to try doing 15 minutes version of my film, knowing full well that every shot is like hours and hours of work.
Yeah.
And, I spent like, at rendering, this is like my computer at the time was pretty horrible. So for me, it was like really, it hurt to like see all this material go. And I remember cutting it down and sort of looking at it and being like, it doesn't touch on these ideas or these little sort of nuggets of like cool, interesting kind of feelings and thoughts and like little nice visuals and so forth. But the story just kind of carries through in a much more interesting way. And I realized I have to cut. I have to stop over trying to do more for the sake of the story, and rather just let the story be its contained little journey, and that's it. Like just focus it on that. And I did that kind of 15-minute exercise where I cut it down, and the film was at a good length, and it ended up going to Sundance. So like it just was like, wow.
Nice.
Just proof of like, okay, maybe the theory could work. And I think that there's a level of that kind of difficulty when you have material and like to have the strength to know that you maybe were wrong earlier. You know what I mean? Like that's a tough thing to do. So hopefully you kind of adapt to the moment. But
And that's something interesting you said about that you were thinking about all the work that went into the different shots, and it's kind of like it's like a sunk cost fallacy kind of thing where you was like, but I did so much work and it's got to go in, and it's easy to get stuck in that loop of just like, that's not fair kind of thing, you know? That's a great point. I never thought of it like that, where
and it gets much tougher when you're in a larger feature film. So in our case, we had we have scenes with many characters, and there were instances where we had to cut scenes with some characters and like cut them down, and that was incredibly difficult to do because there's a lot of hard work that was put into any one moment. Like there's a whole production design, there's a whole element, like there's a lot of money. So like as soon as you go like, oh, I'm just gonna be quote unquote brutal with the material, you're really doing a bit of a disservice to all those people. So it's a hard thing to do, especially when the stakes are higher. And I think that I was very fortunate to have an editor that was quick enough and able to sort of allow me to kind of pursue those things in a way that I immediately would recognize if I'm going too far and pull back. And I think it was like that was a healthy kind of like a workflow that we had going. And in the end, the producers were very encouraging of the whole process. They were like, you know what, you're sort of honing in what do you need to hone in on, and that's that works fine. And there were several instances where I might have cut something, and they were like, hey, you know what, we should put that back in. It actually you're taking away something that is like pretty integral to the film. And I was like, is it really? And then we questioned, like, you know what, you're right. And then going back on my own decision. So like hopefully you're surrounded with the right people that can sort of give you that feedback. And I think it's encouraging when you do have people around you that you trust. So yeah.
Oh yeah. And I mentioned the atmosphere, and the Gothic atmosphere it's just very spooky, which is appropriate. But like, what is that? What do you think that means to you? Like atmosphere. Like how is that achieved? Is it just setting up great props all over the place and scenery and everything, and like what is spooky atmosphere, or maybe atmosphere in general for movies? Like how was that achieved for you, do you think?
Oh, that's a tough one. I think that there was like many factors. I'd say that when I hear someone say that the atmosphere of the film is great, I mean, I take a lot of pride in that, and I think that what probably means is a combination of many many little factors. Or big factors, I guess. But for example, I think that one, there's a lot of conversations you have with your cinematographer in terms of like aesthetics of like light and image. Yeah. And there was a lot of kind of prep work that we spent time on discussing how the film should look. And the image itself can dictate so much of the feeling of your film. So that was like a big component. And then feeding into that conversation was our production designer, who, as soon as we started discussing how we wanted to light it, he became very involved in like how to set up the practical lights and all these little ingredients that sort of feed into the image. And the production design really elevates a huge portion of the atmosphere of the film. I mean, the house itself is a character because of the production design, and it does kind of seep through in the film because of the fact that it was so much care was given to it. And I got to just tremendous credit to our production designer Chris Richmond, because he's a former architect as well, so like he was able to really dig in. Yeah, and like it was one of the elements that I was like, I have to work with him because he obviously knows what he's doing, and it seeps through in the film, just like all those components. And then once you get the material, once you get the shots, you work with the actors, and you bring in another layer, and then all those things kind of accumulate, and then hopefully in the edit you have a very crude version of those things. And you sort of hopefully can pace out the tone you're going after. And a lot of that comes down to personal taste. Every person has a slightly different angle. And I worked with an editor who had also, like, what I love is Mark Towns, the editor, knows the kind of films and the materials he likes, and he has a strong opinion, which is fantastic. So that I can feed off of his thoughts and my own. And we can challenge the material and be like, I know you meant to be this, but have you thought about doing this? And it just brings it into a new feeling. And it's really fun to have that ability to do it. And I think that kind of, again, like that's another step. And then finally you have, like the music and the sound. The sound is sort of, one of the biggest elements for atmosphere, I find. Having good sound work really can go a long way, and knowing when not to have it. Yeah. Especially for a horror film, it's like sometimes less is more. And I think that's a very powerful thing. It's like knowing when to use music, when not to use music, knowing when to use that creaking floorboard and when not to. Like all those little steps go a long way. And I think it's the accumulation of like the production that makes it have like if I like to say that I took care in each department to make sure everybody was in line with what my vision was for the film, and thankfully translated into, like you said, the tone and atmosphere of the film.
Does that help on set? I guess when everybody's running around, like you've got to shoot a scene where people are scared or whatever, and everything's already spooky as it is, production design, et cetera, like you mentioned, like does that help just performances in general?
Yeah, I mean, of course, like definitely. Like if you were in a green screen environment, like just like you'd be having a very hard time. But I think that you'd be like, okay, there's a giant monster here, and like in our case, we actually had, we had a puppeteer show up for one of our special sequences in the film, and like that helped tremendously in helping the performance, how the performance is being done. So. Yeah, I think it does go a long way. I think the actors really appreciate it. And then again, you have like the other side of things where like we had one part of our stage, because we filmed it on a stage, like we had very creaky floors because it was built on like wooden beams. And like as soon as like you have the camera operator, the assistant camera operator, myself, the gaffers, and everybody kind of walking on that set, it creaks, and the actors walking. So all of you, like what you don't see or don't hear is like all the footsteps of everybody walking in that one quiet scene where she's like creeping along. It's like, and you have to like recreate everything. So like it kills the mood a bit, but like I think when they're into it, the actors are so good that they can completely give themselves to the material, and that's when you're like in good hands. And I was very lucky to work with Christina and Mark and David. Like they were all so good at understanding what we were going for. And it made, my life a lot easier as well. Cause it didn't require much to let them sort of feel what we're going for. And that goes a long way. And again, the credit goes to, I think we did like a tour before we shot of the house. So the sets, and I kind of walked them all through, like, this is where this happens. And just sort of explain to them the environment. I think it's really useful to, especially when you're working on a stage, to like let actors know where the sense of like their sense of space should be.
Yeah,
it's useful, and that I think helped. Yeah,
boy, I'm sure sound was just super excited about creaking floors about every single step.
What I take it for granted because like there was a day where they, we knew the material was horrible, and Mark, our editor, had to like literally mute every single footstep, and in the end it was a mess. But we had these Foley artists that came in, and they as soon as they put their tracks in, we were like, it's just, how did they extract these footsteps? I'm like, no, they're all fake. I'm like, that's incredible. Absolutely the most amazing Foley work I've ever seen. I didn't know anybody could do it so well, and they were so good. I remember being just floored by it. Wow, so good.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We'll talk. I know a lot of people are going to be interested in how you got onto Netflix. Like how, what was was there a distribution plan in advance, or was this just, like, how did it all fall down?
So in my case, it was already in Netflix. They're going to be Netflix distributed. So,
right. Okay.
They essentially, what happened was the production had a deal with Netflix, and they were looking for a director. So when
wow, nice.
Yeah. When I first got word of it, I have an agent and a manager, and they let me know that there's this project coming around, and they sent me the script for it, and I got very excited. I was like, I definitely would like to have a chance to sort of pitch my take to the material. And I got to meet David and the production from Imaginarium, and they took a liking to me, and then it followed up with also meeting the side of Netflix and their executives, and sort of pitched my take to them as well. And then from that, they sort of proceeded into a few more meetings, a few conversations, and I basically I got it from that. Like it was sort of one of those surreal instances where there's like a directing assignment that you every once in a while try to get these particular jobs or whatever it might be that you might be drawn into, and it can be competitive. But I was, I don't know, I must have said the right thing the right way, and it just connected for everybody. So I got very lucky that way.
Well, you say lucky, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's, and I've talked about it a little bit before on the show was people just like, it seems like all of a sudden everything works, but you had like a lifetime of work to get to that point.
You're right. I'm being a little bit disingenuous with like the path, because it wasn't just like me getting on a phone call and just saying, "Oh, I can direct this," and
right.
it really wasn't. Like, I think what did most of the talking for me was my body of work. I done several short horror films before this film. At the time, I had done a short before. Like, I had already, I think, four shorts and maybe going on 5 soon after, and they, 3 of those were horror films, and they liked the 2 at the time. I think I had 2 horror films and a third one on its way, and they saw the first 2 and they felt like, okay, this guy definitely knows how to achieve tone, atmosphere, execution. He knows how to make like a creepy like set piece, like all these elements. He knows how to like deal with the actors and all that. And that, I think, helped tremendously. And
yeah,
it really was the reason that I think got me in the door to begin with. So, yeah.
Well, what's something you learned on this film that you can take towards your next feature? Maybe something that went horribly wrong, or something that you got right and you thought, man, I gotta remember that for next time.
I think, well, one thing that I thought was, well, there's the biggest thing is like, as soon as you get into a big film, for me it was a big film. I've done shorts for very little, and then to go into a Netflix film was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
So that for me alone was like, holy shit, I gotta sort of like approach this as if I'm doing my shorts, but in a bigger scale. The difficulty of making a feature film, period, regardless of scale, is like, everything is, the scale is the issue. Like, it means of not only financial scale, but time scale, headspace scale, like you yourself, how much energy you have, like day by day, because you're on it for like a marathon. A short is a sprint, a feature is a marathon, and that's very true. And I think that for me was something that thankfully I had a lot of friends who are filmmakers who sort of prepared me for. They were like, you know what, like, do your workout before you go into a set, because you're going to be on your feet all day. Like, literally do some exercise. Like, you're going to be exhausted, and give yourself like the knowledge that you can't solve everything in the mental space to be in the moment, because there's so much going on. And in my case, like my saving grace was when shit hit the fan. I had a lot of prep work that I had done that I could lean on, because like there's moments like I remember on set where I was like, I am like brain dead. I can't fathom why we need to take another take, but I just in my gut know that this take, there's something wrong with it, and I don't remember why. I'm so tired. Like, let's just go again. Everyone, and the AD is like, I'm going to murder you. Why are you doing this again? You need to give me a reason. And I'm like, I can't think straight right now. I just know we have to. And then, like, there's, everyone's getting ready, and I open my notebooks and I'm like, why did oh my God, of course. And then like you realize, oh, I need to, the actress needs to do this very important key piece of like pivotal to the scene that you just completely forgot about. And, you just missed or in at some stage, and just relying on like your previous self to sort of help you is at least in my case vital. I'm someone that can lose track of myself in a scene very quickly. So doing that prep work, I like to storyboard. I even did an animated previs of certain sequences of my film.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, because I have a visual effects background, so I was like, you know what, I have a copy of Unreal, or I have a 3D software. I can like quickly whip together a crude idea of what I want to do. Yeah. And luckily for me, the production designer had 3D models done of the sets. So I was like, can you just send them over to me, and I'll just move a camera in 3D space and explain it to the DOP and, have a conversation. And that went extraordinarily well. So that is a very useful thing. It's like, I come from the mentality and style of like, do your homework so that when you're on set, you're liberated. I think it goes a long way. Mm-hmm. So that was something that was reinforced rather than learned. But one thing that I did learn in terms of like what I had a certain expectation was, I thought it was going to be just so completely overwhelming and the job would be a whole new thing. going from shorts to features. And the reality is it's not. It's the same work. Your shorts, the process you're going through, the same questions and like hurdles you go through in a short are identical to a bigger film. It's just the scale of it and the perspective of the scale is different. And as soon as you can separate that and just look at the material as what it is, it becomes familiar. And it's actually, you know how to handle that moment. You can do it. Like, I think every short filmmaker who's done a successful short can handle a feature. If like they've done it well, they know the process. Like, find confidence that you are capable. And I remember at first, there's a sort of that imposter syndrome. Like, I can't believe I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
why am I here? What? And then you kind of go through it and you go like, you know what? This is everything that I've done in my short films, just at larger scale, sometimes worse than my short films, because you just have to run faster. There's just no time. Sometimes you're like, I don't have, 3 weeks to prepare for one scene. I have 2 days to prepare for, 6 scenes. Like,
Yeah.
like it's just, it's a different, pace. But I definitely think the beauty of a larger film is that you work with a lot more people. A lot of the burden is lifted off your shoulders. And I think having here's one that I think was useful. I'm somebody who has been accused in the past. Like, one of the things that you don't want to do is be indecisive. And you can be like very critical of your material and you're thinking, oh no, I need to be just right about exactly every single element because, when you want to make the decision correctly. But when you're working in a big film, you don't have time to stall. You have literally like 100 people waiting on your one comment.
Oh,
and you
right.
sort of,
Yeah.
you feel that pressure and you're like, oh, and then you have like 5 other coming at you, like, soon enough, like every second there's something new and new problem. And I think one of the tips I sort of took away from it was give an answer no matter what it is. Just give an answer. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but what I mean is, even if you're not sure, give an answer. So the machine keeps working and then you'll have time to reflect when it comes at you. So like, you will make a mistake. It's okay. But as soon as you see it, you can correct for it. It's better to have the wheel working than having it stall and then you not make a decision and then potentially make the wrong decision later. Like, make the wrong decision now, get it done, fix it later. You know what I mean? Like, it's better to go through that. And then sometimes you surprise yourself. Actually, you know what? It works. And then you're like, you lift yourself a burden. So just have an answer for something, even when you don't know, because then later when it shows up and you look at it, you'll know why it doesn't work or why it does. It's a good little trick that I think can really help. Like, it's easier to be critical of something when you see it than to just sort of think it through in your head. So it's a good way to sort of externalize the internal. So that was a nice little thing I learned on this film.
Nice. No, that makes a lot of sense. Just, make quick decisions, making decisions, be decisive. And, people are looking for it. Like, you're like the leader on set and everything. And nobody can really work until you call the shot. So that's great advice. Well, as we wrap up, tell everybody where to find information about yourself and the film and any other projects or anything you want to shout out.
Yeah. Well, you can see No One Gets Out Alive on Netflix. It's out now, so please, I recommend everybody take a look at it. You can also see some of my short films on my Vimeo, which is you can find it on my website, so santiagomingini.com. And I have an Instagram, but if you want to reach out to me, we can do it there as well. So that's pretty much where you can find some stuff for me.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the show. It was great talking to you.
It was a pleasure.
I enjoyed the film, and so I look forward to more spooky movies or whatever you got in the works. I look forward to them, and good luck on all your future projects.
Thank you so much.
The AFC Indie Filmmaking Podcast is produced by Zombie Cat Productions and Tranquil Aggression Productions. Your host is Chuck Thomas from AtlantaScreenwriter.com. Editing is by Joshua Goldkey. Find him at AtlantaFilmmaking.com. Music and event recording is by Michael Breezy Keys Jones. He is found at LDXSoundLabs.com. Zombie Cat Productions is owned by Molly Coffee. You can find it at ZombieCatProd.com and her at MollyCoffeeDesign.com. I am your announcer, Rob Scheimer. I can be found on SoundCloud. My profile name is ROBSHIMER. Thanks to our media partners at CinemaATLMagazine.com and thank you for listening. Grab all our episodes at afcndyfilm.com.